Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Fantano.
We
Good, how are you?
Hello.
we're
All
great.
right. Who do we have with us? We have me, and then we have.
Yeah, we're gonna do this one a little bit more, I don't know, podcasty, I suppose. Kind of, if there's gonna be at least, I don't know, me and John here formally.
It's you got the name wrong.
Um,
Ignore
oh,
You
it.
okay.
you fucked up.
Um, anyway, so yeah, let's just get into it, I guess. This is something that was just coming to mind because it's this season, it's winter, and this is starting to happen now. That for music critics, it's year-end list time, album of the year rankings, all that kind of stuff. And I guess I just wanted to ask about, I think, especially with the rise of the internet and the huge amount of small publications and blogs there are and so on now, do you think like there's a certain almost too much, or like even halfway through the year, a quarter of the way through the year, like here's what the albums of the year are so far, and everything is always about um, comparing albums in relation to each other. Like it's always about, is this one better than that one that came out this year, even if they're, vastly different, because these lists are always going to have a huge variety of genres. And is it fair, I suppose, to say, like acid rap is better than the new Julia Holter album? Like, I don't know. Do you see what I'm getting at exactly?
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. It's with what the indie sphere in terms of genres and everything is covering these days. Because in the 2000s, it seems like for the most part, the listener base was really preoccupied by just indie rock and indie folk and stuff like that, and now that sort of more electronic music is being covered, more metal is being covered, more hip hop is being covered. You sort of have a larger gap in stylistic sound between all the artists that are ending up on these lists. Um, but to me, it's, for me personally, it all comes down to enjoyment. And that's all I, sort of structure my lists as anyway. I don't know what the philosophy going into anybody else's lists are. And I've already looked at a few lists that have come out so far this year. I think I looked at the Quietest's list, and I've
The
been
Rolling Stone
at,
one just came out.
I didn't see that. I saw theirs, and I saw Beats Per Minute because I think they're putting out their stuff already. I'm going to be doing my stuff the week before Christmas, and uh, I mean, do I feel like the fact that more genres than ever are popping up on these lists is like a disservice, or sort of like does it poke a hole, or does it
Or water things
expose the
down.
flaw? Does it expose the flaw of the midst? Um, no, not necessarily. I mean, I think lists are flawed once you start. I think the idea of taking a list too seriously is where the list gets flawed.
Yeah.
What I mean? I'm just sort of making a list of the albums that were my favorites, and it's sort of like, you know, I think I can make a really definitive list of like my top 10 favorites of this year. You know what I
Right.
mean? But I mean, there are shortcomings in the idea of listing out your 50 favorite records, because the thing is, while there are records I love, love, love this year, and there are records that I sort of love. Um, how gray is that gray area, or how large is the gray area between my 40th favorite record of the year and my 41st
Right.
of the year? You know what I mean? Like you can expect that the criteria, or sort of the I want to say how stringent people are being, can be sort of compromised, because it seems like there's so much reason. It seems like there's so much less reason to be really like, oh, this is my 41st favorite record of the year because of the following 30 reasons. You know what I mean? Like, I think I saw on the Quietest's list, like, the new ASAP Rocky album and the new ASAP Ferg album were back to back. They were like right next to each other. And you know, while I do like both of those albums, and I do think ASAP Rocky's is better than Ferg's, I just found it peculiar that they would be right next to each other. Like, you know, none of the albums, but, you know, underneath Ferg's was worthy of being on top of Ferg's album. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, I think lists tend to be silly if you just take them really, really seriously. However, you know, music is, you know, at least how music is being covered on the internet today and how people get hyped over it and how people gossip about it and so on and so forth. Music is like sports now, you know, it's a competitive thing, and, you know, who had the best record, who sold the most records.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about, is it's like, it almost seems, and I don't know, that not even necessarily getting at like which one is better or worse in these different genres, but like, it seems like a competition sort of like halfway or even earlier through the year is like, is this one going to be album of the year? Like, and people are trying to guess it, what other people are going to say is album of the year. And it seems like just kind of this weird echo chamber of like, is this even really important? Or are we just kind of talking about semantical things that aren't really that constructive, I guess?
I understand you're having an existential list crisis. You know, the thing is, the music world has to, you know, the act of sort of doing these lists right now is sort of the only thing the music world has in its arsenal to keep things interesting in the gap of time between November and February.
Right. No new
you know,
releases.
Where essentially, like, as soon as the end of November breaks, you know, you're getting pretty much like no more interesting album releases, and the album releases that are coming out, if they are major label releases, because, you know, for sure there are artists that come out with records in this time period who may be independent and they're coming out with a fantastic record because they just made it and they want to put it out. But, you know, as far as major label stuff, they are not putting out their best stuff
right
in these months, and they know that the records that will sell in these months will either not do too well or will do well with a niche audience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but these lists are something that, you know, the music world kind of needs in order to keep attention on itself during this time period. You know, and the thing, and the reason things like this are important is because it gets people to pay attention to music who might have been just tuning out the entire year or have only been paying attention part of the year. Because the thing is, you know, I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. And I actually, you know, what drove me to do this is my Eminem review. I went on to Wikipedia to just sort of look at what his album sales have been, and that led me to a few websites on a few web pages on Wikipedia and other websites too that housed lists of the artists that have sold the most records of all time ever.
Yeah.
And you know, and of course, like the people being at the very top of the list.
I've seen those. Yeah, the Eagles' greatest hits is
Metallica.
up there.
Not just like the records, I mean just simply the artists. And I'm talking like Madonna, Beatles, Michael Jackson, Elton John, you know, and a handful of other artists too, all of who have sold 250 million records, you know, at least. And I find it so funny that we perceive those artists to be, you know, like at the top, because they are, but what's funny to me is like 250 million is like such a small fraction of the 7 billion people on the fucking planet. You know, and it's like, it's just funny for me to think that, like, wow, as far as music, like, that's as good as it gets. Like, you're only going to get that, like, that's as big as you could possibly get.
And really, well, now the way that music is so much more fragmented, that's as good as it will probably ever get. Like, I find it hard to believe that there would be a Beatles-like phenomenon ever again, the way people of just like a huge monocultural big group that a ton of people are into.
I think there will be artists in the future who gain as much fame or notoriety, maybe like, you know, Gangnam Style, for example, you know, but it's going to be for a really short amount of time, you know. Like, Psy is not going to be demanding the attention of the entire globe for, a 10-year plus career,
Another interesting thing is, I mean, lists as well, and I think you can see this with, I think this year, the past year or two, the popularity of sites like BuzzFeed have risen a ton because all of their articles are these lists, right? And lists, especially like the way like Rolling Stone will do it, or a lot of publications, is you got to click through a bunch of pages, and so there's also huge ad revenue on the line there. So I think that's a big incentive to make these kind of list sort of articles. And Rolling Stone, I think, is also pretty guilty of I think maybe, I don't know if you'd agree that when you get into the all-time sort of category, there's when things get a little bit more biased or dubious. Like there's a certain when you do the albums of this year,
Rolling Stone favors the bands and the albums and the artists that were popular in Rolling Stone's heyday.
Right.
They do.
And then NME did, it was almost like laughed at by most people. See if I can find it real quick. But they did like a best albums of all time this year, and it was like Britpop Central, pretty much like Blur in the top 10 kind of stuff like that. So I mean, some people might personally have that belief, but I think it's trying to do a best of all time in general, no matter who is doing it, is sort of a it's an unwinnable game. You're not going to please anyone, nor are you going to sound very authoritative, I almost think.
No, definitely not. I mean, when people ask me what my favorite artists or what my favorite albums of all time are, that's probably my least favorite question ever. Because, I feel like what could potentially be my favorite album could be right around the corner. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like to acknowledge... I feel like to actually come forward and say something like, these are the greatest albums of all time, you must really not think much of the future. Because I, for one, am scared to death of doing a list like that, just because I really am expecting something fantastic to come out next year that, will either totally change my view on music, or even if it's something in the case of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, a record that people, is totally critically acclaimed. I'm not so crazy about it, but I acknowledge the fact that after that record came out, at least in how people perceive pop rap, there was kind of a sea change.
Yeah, do you think, I wanted to ask about that. There's been, we already mentioned, I think, more of a shift away from sort of the indie and the indie folk sphere onto a lot of metal. There's a lot more, especially hip hop, I think, has been covered more than it ever has in the past few years by publications that normally wouldn't, So it's not just your magazines like Complex or whatever like that. It's really getting into your Rolling Stones, for example, are going to be reviewing mixtapes and stuff like that, a ton of them. And do you think is a function more of the internet and these publications kind of catching on to that, or is it because I think a lot of people have sort of lamented they feel like indie or rock music is getting sort of stale? Not to say that you can't make a good rock record in the year 2013, but that there is a bit of stagnation of sorts. Would you agree with that sentiment at all? Or
I think the thing that has happened recently is that indie rock just kind of, had a pretty illustrious decade in the 2000s. And, and the thing is, in the 2000s, in my opinion, hip hop was fucking asleep, because the thing is, while you do have great records from artists, in the mainstream like Kanye West and Jay-Z, and you do have really great records coming up from the underground on labels like Stone's Throw and Rhymesayers. A majority of underground artists wanted to sound like 50 Cent, wanted to sound like Jay-Z, wanted to sound like fucking G-Unit and Lloyd Banks and Joel Santana and Cameron and Dipset. And, honestly, the 2000s is one of my least favorite periods for hip-hop. simply because of all that shit.
I would, yeah, I think also we're seeing the rise a lot of artists like Danny Brown or Chance the Rapper are not afraid to wear their non-hip hop influences on their sleeve, and
Yeah.
especially Danny Brown. Danny Brown put out, speaking of, like a list of his favorite albums of all time, and there's stuff like, I think Forever Changes by Love was the #1 for him. So,
Yeah.
and Kid A was on there, and some other things that you wouldn't necessarily expect from someone from like
I thought it was
Danny
Depends.
Brown. I don't remember.
It was Radiohead in general, but that's,
He likes Radiohead, let's say. But I think that there's been, definitely in this new decade a certain like there's less of a fear that you have to stick with the hip hop culture, and you can explore, fuse genres and move around a little bit more without being called out as being like backpacker or
not even just that, but the thing is, like, I feel like people like Danny Brown. Okay, see, here's the thing. I feel like over the course of the 2000s, there was a lot of white people getting into hip hop, and a lot of indie kids getting into hip hop very, very slowly. And I feel like it wasn't until 2010, 2011, 2012 that the growth of that was seen in such a way where you could have an underground artist like Das Racist, whose style is so ridiculous and so absurd that they actually have like a sustainable, like group of people who are into them, because in the 2000s, if you wanted to listen to some really eccentric hip hop, one of the best that you could do was like MF Doom. Right. And the thing is, guys like him were fucking 1 in a million. And now, in 2011, 12, and 13, you have kids who are 16, 17, in their early 20s who are just like biting his style left and right. When at the time that was coming out and I was in college, I was like, man, why don't more people want to sound like this? And as far as like wide-selling artists, or like, an artist that like your average radio listener, your average hip hop radio listener would know about in terms of being weird, I mean, the best you could do is like either Outkast or Mos Def.
Right.
Like both of whom are fantastic and do have their own eccentricities, but definitely not as weird as MF Doom. But still, Mos Def and at least where I was, on the East Coast at the time, or I mean, I still am, but they were not getting as much play as Dipset and Jay-Z and sort of more New York-based artists. But still, that's besides the point. I mean, what I'm saying is that, partially hip-hop has become more open-minded, but I feel like what's also happened is indie kids have become more open-minded to hip-hop as well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, hip-hop shows I've seen recently that I can think about had huge white audiences. Well, I saw A$AP Rocky, which was, and that kind of reminds me too of how like twerking as a cultural phenomenon hit the mainstream so huge. And I mean, this is getting a little bit almost political, but like there's been a lot of people crying out about, this is like just culturally appropriating, like with Miley Cyrus and all that. And it's interesting to see how that kind of stuff is crossing over of what people would have traditionally considered music to not belong to, but be primarily listened to or enjoyed by a certain race, and those barriers seem to be breaking down a lot.
The thing is, it's not even a race thing, because, throughout the 2000s, a majority of those platinum record sales from best-selling hip-hop artists like Jay-Z and Kanye West and 50 Cent, that was white people.
Right.
White people for a majority of those record sales. It's just that a lot of white people who would buy into those records would also buy into all the baggage that would come with hip hop culture, which would mean like, men act like this, men dress like this, women act like that, women dress like that, homosexuals are this is cool, this is not cool, this also over here is not cool, don't do that, don't say this. And now what's happened with not only a lot of artists like, Tyler the Creator and Joey Badass and Danny Brown and Kendrick Lamar, coming up to the internet and sort of being someone who's making music for a new generation who didn't grow up with any of those hangups. I mean, as foul-mouthed and as nasty as someone like Tyler the Creator can be, he doesn't come from somebody who works by those rules.
Right.
He doesn't come from a place where he's grown up learning that dressing like this is gay, saying that is not hip hop, or acting like this is not hip hop, or a beat like that is not hip hop, because he grew up listening to guys like Pharrell, who, for another example, was kind of a hip hop eccentric, but was not as big as he could have potentially been because he didn't fit, sort of the archetype of what an MC should be or dress like or say. You know what I mean? It was only a rarity that you would see him pop up on like a really big single. Of course, he's like a great producer, and like he had a lot of credit in that realm, especially working with Snoop Dogg and Clips and
Right.
Nerd and those big Nerd tracks. But still, like when Nerd was really big, that's still when rap rock was still kind of a viable thing. And then even though Nerd was still coming out with more records, you saw them disappear a little bit because that was, less of a hot combination of things. It's kind of like rap and rock came together for a little while, and then it separated when the bling era came into play.
Right.
So, I mean, to sort of go further down this road, you have not only hip hop artists who are less afraid to experiment because, they don't grow up around all of these hangups, but you have kids that, I don't want to just say they're indie kids, but, there are indie kids who are more open to hip hop than they used to be because, to be quite honest, there were a lot of people who I listened to indie rock. They listened to indie rock in the 2000s. And, we had a lot of us had just a misconception of what hip hop was all about because of what is played on the radio. I think anybody who grows up outside of that culture and only knows about it via radio has that stereotype, unfortunately, but it's also that like Kendrick and like Tyler and like Joey Badass, the thing is the kids who are growing up interested in hip hop music don't have those hangups either, at least a lot of them anyway.
It just made me realize I always thought it was interesting that Pharrell has had sort of an interesting career trajectory. Now he's something like 40 and he has become now like a household name.
Oh yeah, he's 40 and he's hotter than ever. The thing is that he's always been a helpful and a useful tool in hip hop's closet. It's just that he's always been kind of like this weirdo wild card that you couldn't necessarily parade out into the open.
And
you know what I mean?
Things have changed enough now that you can, I guess.
To an extent, to the same extent, like Lupe Fiasco was like that when he first dropped. Like having a big single like that about skateboarding was not like was a weird thing. It's kind of weird to think that just 10 years ago, skate culture and hip hop had very little overlap at all.
Oh, now it's everywhere.
Now it's everywhere. Odd Future is very responsible for that, I think, in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah, probably.
It's not even just, I don't know how many of you guys live on the West Coast.
I do. I'm the only one in LA right now.
Okay. Well, you should know then that it's like, Odd Future has definitely kind of put a spotlight on that from a national perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Things were already like that over there. You know what I mean? Like they grew up in that progressive mindset where, well, I want to skate and I like hip hop. Who gives a shit?
That's what everyone was like that. I remember that in like my middle school years, and that was how it was.
Yeah.
Everyone was listening to the Adolescents. You'd have Amoeba, then you'd have next to that you'd have like I don't know, I forget. I think 50 Cent was probably the biggest thing at the time. Somehow.
Yeah, and what I find hilarious is like how people get so angry now about how the South is dominating radio with this trap sound and putting out like garbage songs that are just mindless.
But they always have. Like Crunk was huge, and then you had the Southern hip hop scene in the early 2000s. I remember that being constantly everywhere.
And I don't even know if you could say that trap belongs. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
not even just crunk, but the thing is, New York was putting out a lot of bullshit club stuff too.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like I feel like New York forgives itself for like buying into the bling area, buying into the bling era, and kind of like establishing that. You know, because the thing is, until then, you know, in the '90s, you did have your hip hop artists who were all about their money and all about their grind, and that was what they rapped about. And you know, that's where gangster rap came from. But at least when it came to what you heard on the radio, you at least heard a little bit more variety. You had more lighthearted rappers, you had more conscious rappers, and because you know the bling era hadn't been established yet, and you didn't have artists as big as Jay-Z yet, you know, putting out Blueprint and putting out the Black Album and so on and so forth. You know, the divide between who was huge and who was underground wasn't as great. You know, so it felt like there was more diversity among the culture. Whereas in the 2000s, that sort of more materialistic message just dominated things to the point where when you have a guy like Kanye West come through with College Dropout, definitely not the most conscious album on the map, but when Kanye drops, he seems like he's wildly different from anything else you'd possibly be listening to.
Yeah, I remember when that dropped. That was a big deal because I remember my brother had the album. I remember a lot of people like he knew were making fun from having the album because he was like, oh, that Kanye's bitch ass, you know, bitch shit right there, talking about you know
Pink
Jesus
polos,
and fuck.
backpacks, yeah.
Pull out your backpack.
And you know the thing is like we think of today how we have people like Danny Brown and Little B, you know, who are totally weird looking and eccentric. You know, it's funny to think that just like 10 years ago, when Kanye came out with his backpack and his like pop pink polo shirts, that was like crazy. You know what I mean? And to a lesser extent, Cameron was like that too.
Yeah.
Because he'd always be wearing the purple, and people constantly gave him shit for that. And you know, it was hard to come across hip hop that wasn't so driven by what you're wearing. You know what I mean? You know, the thing is like it was hard to come across rappers that weren't sort of driven by that message unless you were going to be listening to stuff that people just label backpack shit.
I think it's interesting too, speaking of Kanye, because he has a lot of critical cachet, but he has said, you know, we're also going to put out a Cruel Summer that is, it's more or less for him. I mean, I know it's not his album per se, but it's kind of a throwaway of this is the trend. We're going to do a trap album. It's going to have, you know, this is like some club hooks, and this is an album we can just put out that will be to make some money. And so even, I don't know, I think for then Kanye West was huge, and now he's almost like a commercial staple, even though he has a lot of listeners from a lot of different kind of demographics and music lovers and just casual listeners alike. But then, so then that's almost shifted to the point where he's become people like him have become the standard of that's normal, and then the weirder stuff is, I mean, not even Danny Brown or like something below that level. So it's definitely come a long way in the past 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, Jay-Z, you know, Kanye, and to a lesser extent Jay-Z, have definitely helped in sort of ushering in this era of hip-hop that is, you know, really obsessed with high fashion and progressive thing and, you know, forward-thinking fashion. And, you know, I mean, it's a blessing and it's a curse. I mean, you know, I, for one, am not sort of a big fan of, like, for example, DMX. I never was, and I never will be, and I'm also especially not a huge fan of sort of all of the, you know, sort of assumptions and hangups of what sort of needs to be if this is going to be hip hop. You know, I'm not a big fan of that either. You know, so you know, that annoys me. You know, I just hate the idea of like limitations straight out of the gate. But you know, but the other end of that sword is like, you know, you have people who are coming out, like Travis Scott, for example, who, you know, lack just as much substance as some of those other artists. You know, the only difference is that he's wearing something that Kanye would probably nod his head at and be like, yeah. You know?
Yeah, I feel like that's another thing you probably have experienced with the punk scene. having myself been a long time punk, I hung out with crusties and shit, and like when I was in 10th grade or something like that. And there's a lot of things of what makes true punk or what makes it not, and I'm sure that's a mentality I've long abandoned. I never even really followed it that hard, but it was
fashion punk, man.
Yeah.
One of my least favorite things ever.
Yeah.
Never, ever, 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 ever been a Casualties fan. Keep every Casualties record away from me.
I say the same thing. I can say that about the Exploited as well. I cannot stand the British street punk scene ever.
So yeah, the thing is that hip hop is not unique in that they're really obsessed with how they look. Glam rock was that way. New metal and gothic rock was that way. The thing is, unfortunately, music is great, and I don't think music is ever going to die out in an artistic medium. But people are, especially these days, are just so visual. And, how you look and what you wear sort of adds up to something for people.
And you got to have that flash in the pan appeal.
I think, well, we're treading on Kanye a lot, but just one more thing about that that's kind of interesting is I was thinking there's 4 people, I guess, that even though you look at an album like Yeezus is sold well, but it doesn't have any singles. So it's been a while since Kanye's been on the radio, on mainstream radio anyway, I guess. Cruel Summer wasn't that long ago, but he's been in the mainstream news and been talked about by so many people because between Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, Jay-Z, and Beyonce, that is like 4 people with a massive cultural influence, at least in the United States alone. Just a
North
huge
America.
amount of people are familiar with all of them. And something like the Bound 2 video is going to make a huge splash because of that visual element and the Kim Kardashian factor. So maybe someone who doesn't care about hip hop or whatever is going to look into it because they care about Kim Kardashian, or people are going to start listening to Jay-Z that never did.
Or they want to see the original because they saw the Seth Rogen one.
Right, yeah. But, people who really like Beyonce or people who like Jay-Z are going to watch Beyonce at the Super Bowl. There's so much crossover, and I feel like I don't know, that's just interesting. It's like the power couples there.
Yeah, it's all about promotion. Kanye and Jay-Z have been really great at promoting themselves and sort of keeping their names in everyone's mouths, despite the fact that their albums haven't really had hot singles this year. It's kind of like, I feel like artists like Kanye and Jay-Z and Drake are kind of coming forward and openly acknowledging that I'm not trying to make music for the radio because I'm tired of how the radio sounds and da 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 da. And it's I just can't help but see a certain level of like irony in that, because these are artists who, for a great deal of time, helped craft how the radio sounded, period. Like if you don't like how it sounds, it's partially your fault. Especially Jay-Z, who, for the 2000s, Rockefeller and Def Jam artists were all over the radio, at least in the areas where I was. And the thing about that is, while I have nothing against radio pop music, it is really catchy. I feel like modern, music audiences are so used to music being that simple and instantaneous that hearing Jay-Z and Kanye and Drake drift away from those structures and those appeals, I think, at least in the short term for right now, it's going to hurt them. Maybe sometime into the future, the mainstream ear set will adjust and people will be more open to more abstract beats and, songs that take a little bit longer to appeal, that don't need to sort of, hit you as soon as they come on or be as simple and bubblegum as possible. But, the thing is, you're not going to have a hot single if it's not catchy, even if you're just making your album, quote unquote, for the internet. Like the rule of catchy still applies. Because if it's not catchy, people aren't going to watch it on YouTube, because to be completely honest, I think right now people are even more interested in a quick musical fix than they were when Jay-Z, Kanye were dominating radio.
People talk about Spotify and all that, but I think YouTube is probably one of the biggest, if not one of the biggest ways that people take in music now.
If you take every, I read this article with a graph on digital music media, this website that I follow that has a lot of music news on it. No, it's called Digital Music News, and they reported that if you take all of the streams, and this was like last year, maybe it's a little different this year, but if you take all of the streams of music off of Rdio and Groove Shark and Spotify and Pandora and pretty much every legal music streaming service, it only adds up to about 1/10 of the streams off of YouTube.
Ooh, wow.
And that's only 1/10 of the, from what I understand, I can only guess, that's all I would understand, that's only 1/10 of the legal streams. Because as you already know, there are tons of...
your Vivos.
Yeah, there's tons of music on YouTube that people are streaming that have uploaded to their own YouTube channels or whatever. And, of course, there are artists who are underground and get quite a few plays off of YouTube. Like, for example, I don't know if Anamanaguchi's plays were counted in that bunch because I know they have their own YouTube channel and they get quite a few streams. But yeah, only about 1/10.
That's ridiculous to think about.
That's crazy. Just
especially when you think about how many things of just random EPs from some band from like 30 years ago that did something like just a single, and someone's gonna sit there. Like my dad will sit on YouTube for hours looking for shit that he heard when he was like 10, and he'll just find it, and he'll find it, keep going back, and he's like, oh, how this relates to this, and no, now it relates to this band that's playing now. They're just doing this sound from like 40 years ago.
I think it's interesting that sounds are kind of almost exploding out of YouTube and onto the radio, and there's a certain delay because I was just thinking, now it's been Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites came out 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2010.
And
it was 2010.
Right, and so now there's still though on a lot of radio tracks and there's gonna be, even if it's just a normal song, there has to be a bridge or like a dubstep break in it that sounds Skrillexy.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think though, as far as radio play, just true blue sort of dubstep or bro step songs have kind of like lost their luster a little bit, and what you're now seeing is like these Imagine Dragons kind of songs where you're getting this hybrid put together. But the thing is, right now, I mean, I don't know if it's going to get faster, but at least from what I've been observing since I've been doing the needle drop, like hot music trends sort of have like a 2 to 3 year shelf life. I mean, even Skrillex's last EP was not as good as it should have been. That 3-song EP that he came out with,
Leaving,
Black and Cover, that had like the burial song, burial song on it. That was just like
that was
really
a big deal. That was
to be completely honest, I feel like he could have maybe drawn out his popularity a bit more if that EP had just been full of bangers.
Yeah, that reminds me of a long time ago on Facebook. He posted like, "Film by Apex Twin. Here's my favorite song ever," and everyone's like, "What is this?" Like his fan base was probably not ready for something like that.
I mean, I feel like Skrillex is, and I'll, and I do like Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, and I do like Bangarang. I feel like Skrillex is one of those artists that people shit on because of the lack of knowledge that his fans have of electronic music.
Yeah,
like Daft Punk is wildly popular, just like Skrillex is, but nobody would shit on Daft Punk for being popular. People shit on Skrillex because, like, oh, you have all these fans of quote-unquote electronic music, but they don't know fucking shit about electronic music.
Well, on top of that, he sort of he started the bro step thing. Everyone made a song after that. Everyone went out and did a remix of something, and they started doing movie soundtracks. You have your Inception dubstep, your things like that, and he was the big main reason for this whole fad on YouTube of just dubstep everywhere, and it sort of played itself out to death in a matter of 2 years.
If you wanted to figure the point, he's the one to point it at, I suppose, if you were gunning to do that, which is a little unfair to him.
I mean, it is because, partially it's because artists like Bass Nectar have been around longer than him.
Oh, yeah,
And I mean, Bass Nectar's songs don't bang quite as hard and aren't as jittery or as frantic as Skrillex's songs, but
Skrillex
still,
is the immaculate
thrive
producer
off
of
that.
bro stuff. He's kind of that guy who made it sound as good as it did, and there's no one who's gonna be able to match his style without sounding just like a copycat.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, the electronic music festivals that guys like Skrillex and Deadmau5 play at have been around for a while. It's just that Skrillex's music sort of transcended that whole thing, and brought in this whole new group of listeners that wouldn't have known about this style otherwise. And I know people who are in that age group and listen to Skrillex, but just sort of as like party music. It's not like some kind of deep seated obsession or anything like that. It's just like good time dance music.
I think that's been interesting too when you mentioned festivals. Even the ones that are not just electronic music festivals, though, the big ones like your Lollapaloozas have been shifting way more in that direction. Before there was barely any electronic music there, and now we're going to have maybe several tents. Or Perry Farrell has been saying for a while, like, this is how I want to curate Lollapalooza from now on. This is what it is. It's all about the electronic music and the culture that goes along with that. And the rock acts that show up at those big festivals are largely throwbacks, like The Cure or Red Hot Chili Peppers or Blur, artists that were big a while ago and people want almost for a nostalgia factor, I guess. And whether you're going...
The thing is, see, here's the thing, like, and this all goes back to what we were saying earlier, because we got backtrack, we got off track and started about hip hop and everything. But, the reason that this all happens is for a league of different reasons. It's like indie rock, while hip hop was bullshitting, indie rock had a really illustrious decade. And, not just indie rock, but alternative rock and art rock too. You had acts like Radiohead coming out with some of their best stuff. And, and you had bands like Neutral Milk Hotel, who I know put out their record in the late 90s, but it was kind of a sleeper hit.
Oh yeah, no, 2004 was the official year that Neutral Milk Hotel became recognized. I'd say that was about it.
Yeah, like, it wasn't until like the 2000s that people really started like buying into the whole Neutral Milk Hotel thing. And, Postal Service and Bright Eyes, and, you had a lot of killer artists like coming out with big records. And, not only were people who were into indie rock for a long time into those artists, but, people were really starting to like, and, and Animal Collective too, people were really starting to get amazed as to how much attention these artists were starting to get. Like, when Animal Collective came out with like Meriwether Post Pavilion, when that record I think debuted on Billboard at like 36, that was like the craziest thing ever.
I remember that.
I think it made the top 20 eventually. It like sneaked up
like
there.
36. Whoa, we're like on the charts, everybody.
That's weird to think about that, because Strawberry Jam wasn't that big. I remember Strawberry Jam coming out, and I remember it was pretty popular for like a month, and then I could say I don't remember anything about it happening after that.
Yeah, and what happened is that indie rock essentially, as soon as 2010 came into play and 2011 came into play, it just started resting on its laurels and wasn't trying to advance or do anything new or vibrant or different.
Yeah, then you got your buzz bands like Cults coming in with their their mastery of the radio indie sound.
And then
and Foster the People too. And the thing is, like, and it's not like bands like that are anything new in terms of like making the indie sound like radio friendly. There have always been artists.
No, there's always that, but they've got their style that they're trying to pigeonhole their style of their own version of this sound and make themselves seem like they're more unique versus any other one that's just like them.
But then the problem you run into is those kind of bands, I think, fizzle out pretty quickly. Cults is a good example. I think Sleigh Bells, you could say, is something like this, where it's like that first one sounds really cool. It's like, oh, it kind of has elements of this and that, and then they don't have a new direction to push themselves in, really, and it just kind of ends up being the same sort of hole that they pigeon themselves into.
Well, the thing is, like, there was some really great and strange and experimental noise pop and rock going on in the 2000s, too. That's when, like, you had freaky shit going on, like Man's earliest stuff, and New Body, and Ponytail, and Lightning Bolt was in their heyday. And the thing about Sleigh Bells is that when they came around, they were just like an overly simplified version of a lot of noise pop shit that had been going on for the past 10 years. They weren't doing anything interesting, novel, or all that complex or moving musically. It was just bubblegum stuff. The thing is, every hot indie pop or indie rock artist that has been coming out as of late just hasn't been as, I want to say, hasn't been as bold or as different as like when Arcade Fire or Grizzly Bear or like Bright Eyes or Death Cab for Cutie first came out.
I think
It's like
I think that's probably because of the 80s revival. Everyone's stuck on this 80s revival or just this disco revival. And it's a big thing.
That's the thing. People get lazy and stop focusing on what's a new idea
and what can we bring back. Yeah.
And instead of what we can bring back, and I feel like that has hurt indie rock and pop in a huge way, and it's allowed rap and electronic music to kind of take over in the underground. And the thing about allowing that to happen, because what's funny is in the early 2000s, or I think in the mid 2000s, Jay-Z was quoted as having been at a Grizzly Bear concert and saying that this indie rock stuff is really cool. It reminds me of hip hop in the 90s, and how like
it was big
bold
and
and
new.
fresh and new it is, and how how like cohesive the community is. But the thing what's happened is that allowing electronic music and hip hop to bring those new and exciting sounds instead of indie rock is sort of a self-feeding cycle, in that now what you've essentially done is allowed all of these artists to steal your shine. And then when that occurs, all of the kids, all the teenagers grow up listening to that, and all they want to make is that,
Yeah.
So kids like King Cruel, for example, who I know listens to and makes electronic music and can rap as well, but kids like him who are a very capable singer-songwriter and actually have like personality in their voice, and like, you could talk about his technical chops and whether or not you think they're good or bad, but the dude has like charisma and personality and can write songs. Kids like him are few and far between, not necessarily because there's less talent now, but kids are focusing their talent less in that area these days because they see getting popular as a DJ or as a rapper or as a rap producer a much more viable option. Because if that wasn't the case, all these kids would be picking up guitars and pianos and shit, because indie rock would be what is popular. But instead, indie rock isn't. So because indie rock isn't popular, kids are buying laptops, digital audio workstations,
making trap
PCs,
beats,
and making trap beats instead. And I'm not bitter about it. I mean, I actually love it.
It's just the way things are, right?
It's just the way things are.
But the thing is, it was like that before with the indie. Everyone's making an indie album that sounds just like Modest Mouse mixed with, your postal service.
Yeah.
Or the Shins.
Yeah, the Shins, or you could just be the Shins in general.
Shins, right? Like
and the thing about indie rock is that indie rock and grunge and all that 90 and all the underground stuff that came out through the 90s and the 2000s came up because punk started getting lazy.
Yeah, pop punk scene, man.
Exactly. Pop punk and just like second-rate punk bands that came out during the 90s that just were not as good as anything that came out in the 70s and the 80s. And that's how stuff like emo and hardcore and post-hardcore kind of came to be, because you had these bands that were coming out with more interesting ideas, because you can't just rehash the same shit forever, and keep people's attention. So, I mean, unfortunately, that fact of life has bit indie rock in the ass. And and the thing about people making a big deal about hip hop and electronic music being really big now, that's going to be short to last as well, because there's going to come a point at which everybody shrugs their shoulders and they're like, I'm out of ideas. What do you think? And I'm not saying necessarily rock will come back, but maybe some other new genre or sound or style will kind of come into the front, the forefront, because really with all this revivalism going on, there's potential for a lot of shit to kind of come back into style, because you think about Skrillex and how much his sound dominated music like around 2010 and 2011 and 2012, when the fact of the matter was, dubstep preceded the existence of that EP by almost like 10 years.
Right. There's always something smaller bubbling up, like trap. Trap's been going on for a long time in the South, but it just now sort of really broke out.
Yeah, and not just really broke out, but like really kind of homogenized around that sound that Lex Luger does. Because I mean, the sort of like very constant hi-hat play is at work in some Outkast songs and some UGK songs and a myriad of other artists. But, has it been as crazy as it was like when Flockavelli came out? That was kind of like a new level of like very cacophonous production. But anyway, eventually somebody's just going to shrug their shoulders and just kind of see this trap thing as, having lost its flavor and lost its luster and just not have any more places to go. But I definitely don't think rap as a vehicle will disappear because of that. Because I think playing a guitar is as timeless a mode of communication as is rapping poetry on a microphone. You know what I mean? Or as is playing a drum. Because the thing is, and that's another interesting thing. People talk about how guitars are so boring now and guitar music is so boring, but you don't see people like shying away from drum sets. You can see a drum set everywhere and anywhere. Like nobody's afraid of a drum set.
Yeah, like Subtract, for example, almost gets a little bit of like cred because like, oh wow, these shows he does sequencers and he has a DAW and a laptop and a bunch of stuff going on, but he's also playing a drum kit, at the same time. And so a lot of people there's a huge appeal in that.
I did the same thing at Dan Deacon. It was a dual drums, two people on drums playing over while he has his knob twiddling.
Yeah. And the thing is, and the thing about drums is drums are just as played out a sound as guitar, but
probably more
drums
so.
Yeah, exactly. So, but drums aren't tired. So, the thing is, what people perceive to be old and what people perceive to be old hat can just, like I said, just as I'm saying now, just be a perception merely that, Sometimes what's played out actually isn't.
All right.
Yeah.
Here's a question that I was thinking about. Do you think, since the one thing that's everyone's been a huge positive about the internet changing music is that, independent artists and small artists have a way easier time of coming up and getting noticed and finding their niche of sort, and everyone's kind of splitting into their own little, like, you can find your niche very easily. But do you almost think that because of just the general decline of sales and the rise of streaming that there's sort of a loss of the middle ground of budgets? In a way, I mean that, like, there will be major labels putting out your big chart-topping hits, and then there's the indies, the small stuff that's going to get an audience through the internet. But I don't know, I feel like in maybe the 70s and the 80s and like the heyday of the recording industry, there was money to throw around and people in a major label would take a risk on spending a lot of money on someone who might do something a little bit experimental. So we had music that was had more of an edge to it, or was kind of experimental, or even psychedelic music, stuff like that, and they had a lot of money to put behind it to explore the sounds that they wanted. And now I almost feel that middle area has sort of dropped out, that it's going to be you're either doing what you want as an artist on a small label or by yourself, self-released, or you're going to be on a major label and you're going to be Lana Del Rey and you're just going to be putting out what they want you to, I guess. Do you agree, or do you think that's true, or I don't know?
I mean, I don't know what I'm agreeing with.
He's basically trying to say that there is no middle ground in budget-wise terms of studio. Like, say, back in the 80s, they put Gang of Four on a pretty major label, or the Pixies was on a pretty major independent label in terms of that, and they would give them money as a risk, whether or not. Now it's like you either are basically producing from home or you're a mega star.
Because they can't bank on taking those kind of risks anymore because the sales have just dropped so much in the overall.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, the thing is, like, producing like a megastar isn't as expensive as it used to be either.
That's true.
Because of how cheap recording technology has become and how easy it's been to record really great sounds without paying much money. So I mean, I know there are some artists who, let's just throw the Kanye name out there one more time, who might get a ton of, like, a really huge advance from the label to make such and such record. But even in that case, I can't imagine that they're actually spending all of that money to make the record.
No.
Unless it was to actually, like, we got to clear this sample, we got to pay this guy, we got to copyright this and that and this and that. Although maybe now that I think about it, Kanye might be a bit of an exception because I know him specifically. He specifically has a lot of songwriters come onto his albums.
Yeah, for him, it's hiring producers and songwriters to work as like a big group on a track. So he probably pays a lot for that. But you look at something like Ram, I think is an interesting example of something that is, I mean, it had a huge hit on it and it sold very well. But that album is almost, it's kind of a revival or a throwback to something that from like the 70s where we're gonna hire an orchestra for this 1 minute interlude.
Put Nile Rodgers on everything.
Exactly, and that kind of stuff is, I don't know, I think almost that certain level of excess is a little bit less common.
It's dying out a little bit. I hear you. I mean, I think projects like Ram, just really extravagant projects like that, are sort of becoming more few and far between. And not just Ram, but like, Godspeed Records as well. And obviously they're on a much lower level of popularity than Daft Punk is, but even they are trying to do something really heavy and lavish and, really layered and detailed. I think I don't think it's a matter of the budget not being there, which I think is exemplified from the fact that we just had a new Godspeed record that obviously they afforded to make. And you could take, for example, I mean, it's not a pit orchestra, but Bon Iver's last record had quite a bit of instrumentation on it. I mean, he hired a lot of musicians to come onto that record and make it sound the way it sounded. I just think right now that that's not where the hot sounds are. So that's not where people are sort of putting their money. You know what I mean? Another example would be like the new Fleet Foxes record, the Helplessness Blues record, which I think was a really lavish record, which they had, some strings on there and horns on there on certain parts. I mean, not for the whole album, but, I think lavish albums are out there if you look for them. And I think lavish albums can still be made if that's what your desire is to make. Will the budget be higher than if you wanted to do a remake of the last Beach Fossils record? Well, yeah, probably, but I don't think the resources aren't there. I just think it's a matter of, young up and coming artists not seeing a point in going that direction because that's not a hot sound. That's not a sound that's going to get their names in people's mouths right now.
Yeah.
Of course, Godspeed can do a record like that and get their name in people's mouths because they've been doing that and they cornered that market and they're one of the biggest names in indie of all time.
Or Joanna Newsom, I was thinking.
Yeah, Joanna Newsom's last record, Have One on Me, another great example.
Or even Wise, because she had Van Dyke Parks for string arrangements on Wise, and that's a big name in terms of string arrangements.
I mean, I think I think the resources and I think everything that you would need to do an album like that is there. I just think there's less drive to do it.
Yeah, I just thought of Death Grips is a great example as well. They went to a major label and then kind of just decided shortly we don't actually need this and started self-releasing everything. So that's there's, I think, a lot of artists doing that, or I don't know, moving up and down between.
Everyone's doing the Death Grips drop your album with no warning whatsoever thing.
Yeah, because
the My Bloody Valentine, if you want to count that in terms of, it's like, oh, it's gonna get released eventually. Like, oh, we said it was this day. Nah, you know what? It'll be tomorrow.
I don't. But so Death Grips, I don't think have probably been very inhibited by the fact that they're off of a major label now. They probably still, as far as I can tell, make the music that they want to make, and don't have a problem with that at all because
they're not a high budget group to make music with.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost a lot for them to make their kind of music. That was I didn't consider that though. The type of music that people want to make, that's very true. I guess is cheaper and you can get more out of less money now than you ever used to be able to.
You give people the benefit of the doubt that they're going to want to make something that's different.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right in saying that. In the past, there were major labels that, would take a risk on a really experimental band or take a risk on a band that they hadn't even heard yet. I mean, you could look up the history of the band Faust, and their manager at the time got them I believe, $1 million deal to record their first record just off the back of how great he told them that they were.
I think the same thing happened with Frank Zappa when they were doing Freak Out. Like, they got the guy that, oh, they're a white blues band, they're going to do this. And Zappa pretty much just took over the studio and just did whatever he wants.
That reminds me, too, I mean, another example. A lot of people know I'm around Unmute and stuff. I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. His first 2 albums were, like, they pretty much were bombs. He got a bunch of money and then made 2 albums that didn't sell, and then somehow convinced a label to say, okay, wait, give me a ton of money and I swear I'll make a 3rd one that's really excellent. And it took off, and that was Born to Run. But like, I don't feel like that could happen now, that you could have 2 albums that wouldn't sell and then a major label's like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll pay for that 3rd one and give you a ton of money.
Yeah, it's kind of like Bowie as well. His first album, that self-titled that no one ever listens to. Yeah. And then you get your Space Oddity there, and then like, wow, something changed there.
No, I mean, I think, I mean, there are artists here and there who, I'm trying to think of one recently. Chelsea Wolfe would be an example of someone who, I mean, obviously she's not huge, but she had a few records come out before that Apocalypsis record that, you know, that didn't do anything.
Yeah.
You know, there are a handful of artists out there like that right now. I mean, Lana Del Rey is an example. She had that one record.
And she was Lizzie Grant.
Yeah.
I
want to say Ariel Pink as well, maybe, but then again, I don't know if it's more of a thing of like he just didn't have any distribution because it's, you know, making it out of his own apartment. And
yeah, he got Animal Collective like found one of his tapes on their bus or something like that, I believe, is how Ariel Pink got picked up and got.
I'm trying to think of a recent act that is on a major label right now, but
Katy Perry. She had a whole album she made as, you know, Catherine, whatever her real name is, that's the same as someone else.
I think that's a big phenomenon.
The thing is, was that record also under the same record label?
I don't think so, maybe, but I'm just saying it's one of those things, like, you know, it's
because the thing is, what we're talking about is like, is there a record label out there that's essentially taking a chance on a band to the point where they'll put out 2 shitty records in hopes that the 3rd one will be great?
Yeah, I did think about that.
I don't think, while we're not in that era right now where we're seeing Columbia do that, what we're sort of failing to talk about or failing to realize is that, you know, labels like Sony and Columbia and Warner Brothers own a lot of, or own a share in these smaller labels, or distribute for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's only like 4 actual independent labels, and I think 4AD and Matador are like 2 of them.
Exactly. So they don't need to, like, you know, be looking for the Shabazz Palaces of the world. You know, they don't need to be spending any time on that. They could just take 50% of Sub Pop's cut and then just allow Sub Pop to, you know, work all of that. You know, the thing is, the thing that the major labels have been really great at is allowing all of these different newer labels to kind of fracture off and you know, allow them to kind of do their own thing, because that makes them money. Plus, on top of it, you know, and I feel like they learned this in the 2000s when you grab artists that get big in the indie world, like Death Cab for Cutie and Modest Mouse, for example, and then just put them directly on your major label, it puts a sour taste in everybody's mouth.
Yeah.
Whereas they realized that instead of putting them directly on the label, they could just pass the money down to the independent label and then just promote them sort of via the independent label and end up making the same money back anyway, just with them being under that label name.
Yeah.
I think the trend we came up with, though, I just sort of realized with these artists we're talking about, like Katy Perry and Lana Del Rey, and so on, I just thought Lorde is another one, is what they seem to be doing is they find someone who's a nobody and then they disappear for 3 years and then suddenly come back with a new identity, new sound, all that kind of stuff. Like there's some, you know, Lorde got picked up by a label when she was like 13 or something. And
that's what some people told me, but what was her, I haven't found.
She didn't have any output during that time, is what I'm saying, is they just kind of had her in the stable almost, so to speak, of like.
Is there a place I can go online to read this?
I'm trying to remember. I think I'll double check right now. I mean, just stuff like Wikipedia is not the best source, but Pure Heroine is her first LP, I believe. She had an EP, I think. Yeah, the Love Club EP.
Yeah, and that came out recently as well. But was there anything that she had come out with in that 3-year period in which she was signed and that came out with that EP?
No, those are her only releases that exist as far as I can tell, just of what's off Wikipedia here. So like, I think yeah, they kind of do, and Lana Del Rey, that's sort of was a lot of the controversy that surrounded her is like, you come back, you have a different hair color, and you have a different name, and suddenly it feels like the label kind of just sat there and grew that talent and then puts it out when they feel like it's ready. And Katy
I thought
Perry,
that was intentional. I thought they were like purposely trying to like do that whole old-fashioned, you got your girl pop group marketing here. Like they just kind of throw them together. They're good singers together, put them in, give them a new look, give them what's hip at the time, and then just put them in the sound studio and just get them going. That was kind of the thing. I thought that was the whole gimmick of Lana Del Rey, that she was supposed to be this, classic 60s pop sensation revivalist, manufactured sensation.
I mean, that may be the case, but honestly, even if Lorde had been signed since she was like 13 or whatever, still there's nothing about Royals that to me says radio pop.
That's
or
true.
To me that says groomed.
I actually thought Royals was really refreshing in terms of like the radio landscape and just how minimalistic and simple it is, of just kind of, here's a nice, well-written song. It's got a few overdubs, but otherwise it's just...
Yeah, it's a catchy song. The beat in the instrumental is really simple. I think the overt simplicity hurts Pure Heroine in the long run as an album, and it's also a song that kind of like Kendrick's Swimming Pools, kind of has references to these things that you constantly hear in mainstream pop music right now, and it sort of sounds like it's about that on the surface, but really it's kind of I don't want to say a parody, but a bit of a shot in the arm toward music.
Tongue-in-cheek kind of thing.
Yeah, like Swimming Pools has become like a frat drinking song in a way, which is pretty ironic considering the subject matter of the song. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if we're exactly right on this, or what this kind of theory almost about how Lorde is maybe an exception to the rule, but I think that is interesting, the way where the stars come from, I guess, where the major labels find them and where they pull them from a lot of times seems to be from just like a relatively unknown place. They have some small release and said, we can change this, we can get a good producer here, we can get Dr. Luke on this, and there's potential here.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hear you, and I mean, I think I think the major labels, while they do own stakes in a lot of these smaller quote unquote independent labels, and they're able to put on artists in the underground through that, I don't think they're just going to simply give up trying to put on artists like Lorde every once in a while, and also continue working with bands like Flaming Lips and MGMT, because the thing is, I don't feel like they're necessarily hurting themselves by continuing to work with artists like that, even if those artists' latest records weren't their hottest, simply because it's all about niche stuff right now.
Although, I feel it's almost tragic that the Flaming Lips Kesha collaboration got canned. Whether it would be good or not, I was very interested.
Oh, that
to
song
hear
off
what that
the
would
Petty
be
Fuentes
like.
is great, though.
Yeah, the 2012. Yeah, I really liked that song. I thought that was.
Yeah, I was actually I didn't know that it had gotten canned. I'm actually sad to hear that.
Yeah,
no.
he didn't say why, but Wayne tweeted something of we can't explain why, but it's not happening now.
Because the thing is, I feel like Kesha, as far as modern female pop artists go, I feel like she has a freak flag that she doesn't fly as much as she could.
Yeah, we've actually had a discussion about this before, how she could be like Bjork or something, someone who's a little bit more out there, but still very catchy, still could be in the mainstream, and could be weirder than she is, and she kind of just sticks with this party girls mentality then she has this little underlying bit of weirdness she exposes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's, and that's, I think, sort of, when Lady Gaga first came around, people thought that Lady Gaga might sort of be like that, and then she just kind of moved into a more stale sort of direction, I think, than people expected that she might go in.
Yeah, but you
you know,
could
I
consider
feel
that
like
Lady Gaga is something like a reference to Japanese culture in that their pop stars are so eccentric in a way, but their music is just very samey, very.
Yeah, that's
Has
a
its
good,
own
actually a good thought.
eccentricities. But
you
yeah,
know, it's just that, you know, when you get in that position, in the position of like a Lady Gaga, you know, I don't know how much leeway you have to kind of make the album that you want. And not only that, I feel like it's also kind of tempting to sort of just give in and make the record that's gonna appeal to the widest audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you love your fans, you love the attention you get from your fans, you want to just do something for your fans.
This
Exactly.
reminds me of an article that just came out as which one of the Jonas brothers, I forget which, just did,
Joe.
yeah,
We'll just go with
Joe
that.
Jonas just did like a tell-all article about his experience in the Disney machine, sort of, and like the pressure that's kind of going on a lot of these young people. Like Lorde is, I mean, she's not like in a boy band or something like the Jonas Brothers, but they're having all this fame and expectations thrust onto them, especially of like he seemed to be
Purity rings.
almost afraid, like, and just paranoid about stuff coming out like that would break the image that he's supposed to maintain for his group, and that he couldn't be anything outside of that or there would be trouble. Like they said that Disney had, like, when the Vanessa Hudgens like nude photo scandal kind of broke out, it was like the offices were on lockdown. Like they had him there, no one could leave the whole day because it was like, we need to just control the damage and make, like, it was panic mode. I don't know, that kind of stuff is really fascinating in the way that even now, even those major labels have some less influence than they used to, though they still have immense control over a lot of these young artists' lives that are just coming out from being at a very young age, and then they have an image to maintain.
I saw that your new video, Anthony. I saw your vinyl update, and I saw you had the Idiot, and you said you had not listened to it yet. I was disappointed, but have you heard it yet?
I haven't listened to it all the way through yet. No, I did listen to some tracks off of it before when people were telling me, and I was doing some research about how there were songs on it that influenced tracks from LCD Sound System's latest record.
Yeah.
But I haven't put the record on the platter yet. No, that was actually one of the few. That was one of the few vinyl updates that I've done where I was like, man, it's been like 2 months since I've done a vinyl update, and there are like 3 records in this pile that I haven't even listened to yet. I'm just like, fuck it, let's just do it.
That's
you know,
cool.
So yeah, I mean, I've known Lust for Life, and I live and die by the Stooges discography.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was weird.
Yeah.
You love the Stooges. It's like, wow, he's never listened to solo Iggy Pop, like the 2 best records in this considered, legend. And it's like the Idiot's one of my favorite things of all time, as well as Lust for Life. I love the shit out of those albums. And we're actually having it on the Mucella this year. On Mucella, we have the Idiot.
That made me even more excited to hear that it's one of your favorite things ever.
Oh yeah, no, it's one of my favorite things ever, and you didn't listen to it yet, and I'm disappointed in you.
How can you listen to Joy Division if you haven't listened to the Idiot?
How can you listen to the Berlin trilogy and not know?
You know what's funny is like just what that's another funny thing about how people sort of may or may not jump on you, and not just you in general, but like somebody who reviews music.
Yeah.
You know, for having not heard certain records.
Mm-hmm.
To be completely honest, I don't profess to have heard every single record that is, like every single record in the Rolling Stone 500, for example. I haven't heard all those fucking records.
Yeah, no, I haven't either.
There are a lot of people that haven't. And the thing is, and I don't plan on stopping. Listening to older music, and I'll listen to older music as it kind of trickles in. And I feel like having that reaction isn't necessarily a bad thing, because when I have that reaction, I'm like, you haven't heard this? Let's go listen to it.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. It's like, let's just do it right now.
It's cool. But it's like, I know in the back of my head what people deem to be classic and what people don't. And part of the reason that I don't necessarily buckle down and listen to every single thing that is like, quote unquote classic is
You have new things to
sometimes-
review every week, though. You got to do
Well,
stuff. You
not-
have your
not
job
even
to
that.
keep going with.
Not even that. Not even that. It's just sometimes some of this classic shit completely disappoints me. I, for example, I've liked Spiritualized, since like the late 2000s, and I really love their new record, and I love Ladies and Gentlemen, and I never really forced myself to sit down and listen to Spacemen 3. And I think earlier this year. Hold on a second. I'm got to dig in my fucking record collection. Oh, never mind. Never mind. It's not there anymore. I already traded it in.
Oh, good. I'm guessing it was a light 3.
Yeah, I bought that record of theirs. What fucking record is it? Oh my god.
Just give the color and you'll know.
Just give the color. The Perfect Prescription.
Yeah, there you go.
I bought that and I thought it was just not good. I was like, what is this? This is
Most
like
people,
a
I
boring Velvet Underground record.
That's
That's what I say. It's like Velvet
I have the
Underground, but
same,
spiritualized, essentially.
That's sort of how I
So,
felt
it's,
about Space
I mean, I could sort of appreciate the record from the standpoint of like New Order's first album, where it still kind of sounds like Joy Division, but it doesn't quite sound New Order-y yet.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this weird transition period where people like give the record a thumbs up, but they're like, are no like
They're still not over Joy Division.
essential New Order tracks on it. Like New Order did not define their sound on that record. There was like a transition period. And another classics disappointment that I had recently was the Wipers. Was not into that, what is it, Youth of Today record?
Youth of America? Wow, that's another one. I love that one.
Yeah, I was not into that record. Oh my god, it's still sitting over here next to me.
I'd still say that Is It Real's better.
I mean, I will try to check out something else from them maybe further down the road, because I felt like I felt like for that time period, I might like to check out their next record, because I feel like at that time period what they were doing wasn't particular. I mean, for post-punk, like it's not like there weren't any post-punk bands that were
there was a ton of them.
the same ideas, and I felt like I just felt like the recording was way too rough for me to appreciate. I was like, okay, I mean, it's like they have some cool songs here and there. I especially like the more instrumentally driven bits on the second side of the album, and I really love the title track, the really long title track.
Yeah,
but there are just so many tracks that are so roughly recorded and so humdrum to me on the first half that I just wasn't into it.
Now that may affect your opinion on The Idiot as well, because that's kind of a salvaged project of recordings they had. A lot of it's got not that great production-wise.
I might get disappointed here and there by some certain things that people tell me to check out, but but those are classic records. There's some records from artists that aren't considered classics, but they're classics to me. Or there are some records that people, it seems like people think the perfect record is this in their discography, and I prefer another record.
Yeah, I have that same thing. I just don't enjoy any.
Like for a while, I would not listen to Talking Heads because I heard one of their later records and I hated it, and then I went back and I listened to earlier stuff of theirs. I was like, oh, okay, this is actually fantastic, and now Talking Heads is one of my favorite bands. And same with Dinosaur Jr. Somebody threw me a copy of Green Mind, which I really do not like.
Yeah, that's not a good. That's not the best one to go for with them.
Yeah. And then going back and listening to You're Living All Over Me, and somebody being like, well, why'd you listen to that? Why didn't you listen to Bug? And then listening to Bug instead and being like, okay, this is great. Some records, that people consider classic are just going to be disappointing. So, I don't like hold myself to the classics, or something like that.
That's not a thing.
Listen to the classics.
The classics are more of a thing to sit there and say, you know what, listen to this record. If you like it, you like it, and if you don't, you're not going to like it. Oh well.
Do you believe that people make too big of a deal over canon, like Rolling Stone or Pitchfork?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. Like, there's certain, when you come into certain albums, they have such a like it's in the canon. It's so
Yeah, it's the dark side of the moon.
it
Man.
changes
You
your
gotta listen to this.
expectations a lot when you approach the record because you know that there's already a high expectation of like this is supposed to be revolutionary.
I mean, I feel like uh, I feel like that me personally, I can't be like that because it's like my job to hype shit up. You know what I mean? Like I can't like, you know, listen to that Wipers record and then be angry that it was hyped and that I spent my money on it, which I did, you know, having not heard it. But you know, that's like that's the way hype works, you know? Like you know, I see, like in Pitchfork, for example, all of these retrospective articles, like critically re-examining the Wipers, and you know, and I see a lot of people, you know, sort of talking about how they're this awesome overlooked post-punk gem, and on top of it, post-punk is like one of my favorite genres of music, you know, to pick up records in, and so I mean, it just, you know, all of the boxes seem to be checked in that, you know, it's like I'm for sure that I'm going to love this. And, you know, I did love some tracks on it, but, you know, just didn't end up happening. And, you know, you can't get mad over that because, you know, that's just one way of hearing about a record because, you know, it would be inconsistent of me if I didn't also get mad because my friend told me to listen to Dinosaur Jr. and I didn't like that record that he recommended. And then I got mad at him. You know, it's just
Blame
even
everything on your friend.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like it's even though it's turning up on a website like Rolling Stone or Pitchfork, it's still just a preference. You know, just because it's on like a really nice looking website doesn't make it any more authoritative. I mean, that person may have listened to more music than you and you know and may know more about different genres than you, and I feel like that carries a bit of weight. But you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that just because they recommended one record to you that you don't like, that their opinion isn't valuable in at least some way, because they might have turned you on to 4 other records that you like, or that person might be into some weirder things than you are. Like, you know, restaurant or food critics can be the same way. Some guy may really love eating liver and just be like, this is the best fucking liver I've had in my life. You know, it's like, and I'm vegan, you know, and it's like, not into it. You know what I mean? Like,
I think that's a good segue into my other question I want to ask. You get a lot of shit for certain album reviews, and especially this is not even just from new community. Like, you know, everyone was gonna go on about the zombie thing or something like that. And I was thinking more like the Arctic Monkeys album review or the Eminem one. You get a lot of outside people randomly coming in and just talking shit to you. What is your usual reaction to things like that? I mean, how do you just?
Honestly,
I mean, it's not that you have
now,
to deal with it as much as you have to just sit there and just like look at it and watch it happen and unfold.
I mean, my general rule of thumb is like I try to pay attention to like the first 100 or so comments that pour in and just leave it at that. Because the thing is, I could, you know, with the level of comments that I'm getting every day now on some of my reviews, I mean, I could be spending all day responding and reading every single thing people are saying to me and getting nothing done whatsoever.
Well, you could just somehow, if only you could answer to everyone, you know, shut up, you anime nerd. That'd be the best response.
You know, like, and that's another funny thing that I feel like we could talk about. Let's talk about that for a second. I think
Photoshop comments.
I think my new favorite hilarious MU joke is Photoshopped Anthony Fantano comments.
Yes, I love those.
And there was one about, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was like this one comment about it was a very long paragraph of text, and I'm pretty sure what was said in it was racist. And a lot of people were like, "What, Anthony? You said this? Why would you say this? Oh my god!" And it's like, dude, the comment has 100 thumbs up under it. Like, who would thumb that up 100 times? Like, I'm pretty sure immediately if I actually said any of that, like, my career would be over, and every music website would probably be posting it up there, Anthony Fantano, racist, you know, or something like that, just to, like, discredit me or some bullshit. But yeah, Photoshopped comments are probably my new favorite. MU joke.
What about
It's
the like
really
all the melon photoshops? I thought that was your favorite for a while.
angry.
The melon the melon thing has gotten old,
Yeah, it is old at this
It's
point.
old.
and
I mean, how long ago was that? Did it happen? That was a long time ago.
it's old, and and the thing is, Zombie has said funnier things about me that he's actually deleted off of his Twitter account. So
We had a thing where we were reading off things Zombie was tweeting about, and we have somebody doing a
In
good zombie
annoying
impression, or
Cockney
what we
accent.
assume he sounds like. What we assume he sounds like, and just he posts the dumbest shit on his Twitter. I have no idea what he has in terms of in his brain, what he thinks about when he types these things out.
there was something that happened right after Zombie said the thing about me being a melon that I'm trying to remember. It was a pretty hilarious. It was funnier to me than saying melon all the time. Somebody on MU went on YouTube and started posting up a bunch of tracks that sounded like Zombie tracks, and started calling himself like Melon something, or like some kind of like variant of the name Zombie, and then people were like sending him the music and then being like, "This is better than you," or like, "Why are you ripping off this guy?" or something like that. And that I thought was pretty hilarious, because it wasn't just like saying melon. Like, somebody went out of their way to like make all these tracks that sounded exactly like Zombie songs,
It's,
and then just like sort of like create this altered musical ego. And that I thought was hilarious.
that's so interesting.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
But yeah, the melon thing and the
You've been to
melon-
England, mate? You've been to England before? You don't know the fucking difference between jungle and breakbeat?
that is so that was funny to me, because when he
Microgenre in general, just kind of that
like
mentality.
not even that, it's like I was merely saying that in jungle you use break beats, which you do.
Yeah, I know.
And he like picked it up as like, "You what, mate?"
Yeah.
So,
That was he came out like at you full chav and just went a bombardment of random comments, almost unrelated to you. Eventually, leave Dark Alley sent a comment to him on Twitter.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I've seen him go at some music reviewers, whose information was actually off, and and they really got the shitty end of the stick, and I think I actually got off really easy.
Well, I mean, Word just came at you for that thing. Like, didn't they say something about you had some wrong facts about Title Fight, and they did that little like MS Paint thing of internet's biggest dumbass or something?
No, I didn't have any wrong facts about Title Fight. The thing with is that the day before they put that thing up on Facebook, somebody asked me if I was into this new project that they were involved with, and I said no, I've never really been a big fan, and that's it. And 24 hours later, they're saying this shit about me at random on Facebook. It doesn't make any sense.
I like that they picked the Blood Orange review though, because I did not enjoy that one bit, and your review was quite.
I don't
quite
even
good.
think it had anything to do with the Blood Orange review. I think they just picked a random review because I've never reviewed them.
Oh no, I just like that they picked that one at random though. It's like a
Yeah.
negative video, so they picked the closest, most recent negative, review.
I don't even know if it had anything to do with being negative. I think they were just mad that I didn't like a new project of theirs and that I wasn't considering reviewing them or something, because honestly, I've never said anything about them. And even if I were to review a record of theirs, I can't imagine that it would be that negative, because I just kind of think their music is okay. I'm just not really a huge fan of them, and that's all I really said in the tweet. I wasn't like, "Worse sucks" or anything like that. I mean, I've just never really been a fan of theirs, and as a result, I've avoided them. Their records have been coming my way, and I'm like, "Nah, I'll pass." They've played in my area, and I didn't go to the show because I'm not really into Whir.
Yeah, I'm not that into him either.
There are a lot of artists that I'm just not that. People get mad about shit that I hate, and that hate in quotes, because I review it and I give it a 2 and something like that. But there are a lot of artists that I don't like either, and I just generally avoid them. It's not like I'm like this pretty hate machine, and I just like, as soon as I hear something I hate, I gotta review it because I fucking hate it.
Yeah, this isn't a controversy machine here. We're going for.
Yeah, it's interesting too, though. You got to think about with Twitter and everything, that like you as a reviewer, there's a face on you sort of and more of a persona when you know people complain about Pitchfork gave us a bad review or whatever.
But they can't go after that one writer because it's just some random guy. As far as they know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good and a bad thing. I mean, I think it is a double-edged sword because I think in one respect, people who are really passionate about music and are music fans have more reason to go at me because I'm another guy. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I've never
who the
gone
fuck
after
is
you for
this
things
guy?
you've hated.
They see me and they get angry because they could put a face on their anger. But I think the fact that I'm a person also makes some artists hesitate from mentioning me by name because that would just bring me more attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like for example, if after my Blood Orange review, Blood Orange immediately started just posting my review everywhere and just being like, fuck this guy, that would just be getting my name out there. Whereas Pitchfork, that's just a logo on a website. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean anything to some people.
Yeah.
If people see another person hating on a record that they love, they could get angry at that person. Whereas it's harder to get angrier at a website. It's like it's a fucking website.
See, with you, I just get disappointed. It's like, oh, he didn't like it. No, now I can't just be like, oh, Anthony doesn't like the same things I like. It's disappointing for me as much as it's anger.
Or the reverse, when Reflector came out, a few of us that had been talking were really not fans of it. Like, what is with all these good reviews of Reflector? I mean, of us talking, just a lot of people in general.
Even you said as an Arcade Fire fan, it was disappointing. Hey. It was weaker than it should have been.
And then and then your review came out and we're like, oh good, there's someone out there who didn't like this. Like
someone who seems to have their head on straight.
No, I mean the thing is when I'm trying to make my reviews as personal as possible, and I feel like the best way to do that is for you to see me, and it's easier for you to relate to another person, even if you disagree with that person, because you can relate to the fact that this is a really big record right now, but I'm not big on it. And, as much as you may love the new Arcade Fire album or you may love the new Death Grips album, you've had moments when there was something really big out there that it just didn't appeal to you at all, So, while there are people that hate on me, there are a lot of people who, like you just said, kind of get in that disappointment position because it's like, it sucks that he didn't like it. But, there have been all these records that we've had in common before. And, it's not like I haven't been in that position either where I didn't like so-and-so's new big record and I see the appeal.
Yeah, it's basically what I was thinking of.
Speaking of the other reviewers and reviews in general, do you ever feel that there's a certain amount of stigma being on YouTube that you feel from other reviewers?
Honestly, I thought when I first started doing my thing on YouTube, it was only meant to supplement the blog and just kind of be this one thing that I would do on the blog once a week or once every 2 weeks. That would be different than what everybody else is doing, because every blog that I had followed up until that point, some of which are still around, some of which have folded, didn't do anything having to do with talking about albums on video. So, I thought that it would just be something different to do on my blog, and I thought that trying to do this through YouTube or try to focus more on being involved in the YouTube community would just, like you said, stigmatize me and just end up having people take me less seriously and kind of see me as like a YouTube guy versus like a music reviewer or a music fan. It's like at first I feared like YouTube sort of like coinciding every single thing that I did. And it's been kind of interesting to see that has not really been the case ever. I mean, only in the case of like if I'm dealing with people who are in traditional media, like somebody who works at a TV station or somebody who works at a radio station, and I'm like, I have a YouTube channel. Then they might take me less seriously. But as far as like music fans and people who have music blogs, the thing is, right now the option isn't even there for them to take me less seriously because I'm involved on YouTube, because there are music reviewers who their reviews that they write don't get even half as many views as some of the shit that I'm putting up on YouTube. You know, it's like it's merely just a game of numbers. You know what I mean? It's like you can't just fucking ignore the fact that my Eminem review, you know, got over 100,000 views in a matter of weeks. You know what I mean? Like, even though that may not be the most viewed Eminem review on the internet, there are some reviewers out there who would love for their review to have been read or watched that many times.
Yeah.
You know, or at least clicked on. So, I mean, I don't think the Needle Drop is like the biggest musical entity out there in terms of, you know, music coverage. I mean, I would like it to go in that direction, if not be at least, you know, closer to that. But I mean, I think I'm in a position where it's sort of on its way to being that, because I mean, you know, I don't know, as far as like the numbers go in terms of the views that I'm getting and the subscribers that I have, you know, just constantly being at this slow upward hike. You know, you can't really argue with the direction that it's going in. You know, you can, oh well, Anthony Fantano's doing a bad job. Well, it's like, how do you even you know, argue that? Because the thing is, if I wasn't making content that was connecting with people, and that's all I'm really trying to do, if I wasn't making content that was connecting with people, I wouldn't be having this very steady growth in views and subscribers.
Yeah.
Yes. I was kind of thinking, you know, it's almost like in music, it's missing. It reminds me of sort of like what Siskel and Ebert became to people in terms of like, here's a show, it's in video format, and it's an informal sort of discussion about how we personally feel about this film. And a lot of music criticism is written, and it's very formal and official and declarative. And I think what you offer is sort of, it's a more casual, not to say that makes it any less legitimate or intellectual or anything like that, but it's personal, like you said.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm just trying to, you know, I mean, I see myself getting ambitious and doing projects like, you know, maybe when fucking 2020 rolls in, I'll want to do my favorite albums of the past 10 years, you know, because the Needle Drop has been around for that long. You know what I mean? You know, and I could see myself, you know, trying to be authoritative and coming out with big ambitious lists like that. But I mean, I still will never want to gravitate away from just being personal and trying to be as face-to-face about it as possible. You know, it's like I'm trying to make it sort of like, you know, everything that I say in my videos, I would say to you maybe a little less eloquently and maybe with some more swear words, but I would say to you if we were talking about this album face-to-face. You know? Like,
Yeah, that's exactly how I go about things.
Does it weird you out at all that, like, if you put into YouTube Danny Brown XXX, your review will be the third thing that will show up? And there's like a lot of things like that just, the Needle Drop will just keep coming up if you just search a song or an album by itself.
I mean, no, I mean, I don't think that's
weird, but it's interesting.
That's not a weird thing to me. I mean, that's always been kind of the goal. I mean, it was weird to me in like 2010, because in 2010, that's when that first started happening. Like, I think one of the first times that happened was when I did a review of Flying Lotus's Cosmogramma, which I'm pretty sure came out in 2010.
Yeah, that was 2010.
And that was one of the first reviews that not only when you punched in Cosmogramma, my review popped right up, but YouTube was putting it inside of the they used to, if you punched in a key, they used to put all those related videos in the right side on the search. Now they do that a little less, and they put the related videos in the right side when you actually click on the video. So now the relateds are when you're actually watching the video, which is, you know, something that I don't like, you know, but anyway. But that was one of the first times that my videos were popping up in there too. And I think in that year, that's the year I also got partnered, and that's the year that somebody at YouTube also contacted. That was like my first contact with YouTube, because there were people who work there and still work there who watch my show and like my show and get turned on to new music on a regular basis through my show. And so, I mean, and that's sort of been like a blessing, and just something that that when it was first happening, it was strange, because at that time, I didn't even think I had a 5,000 subscribers yet. I think I made when I first got partnered, I think I might have had around 2,000 subscribers. And, and when I was still, even then, I was like, how far can this possibly go?
Like a year later, you get on the front page for like a month or something like that, or maybe a year. I don't forget, like the rest of that year.
I'm trying to remember if it was 2011 or 20. It must have been 2011, because that's when Triple X stopped. So I mean, it was 2011. I got invited into this contest that YouTube had between 4 different YouTube channels, just to have their fans go on to, that YouTube blog webpage and vote for them to win this contest. And essentially what you were going to win was just to be on the front page for a day. And I ended up on the front page just because I won that contest. But even before that, there was a girl who currently doesn't work there now, at least in this capacity, but there was a girl who was in control of curating the YouTube music page and would allow me to put a video up once a month to be like, hey, these are my favorite albums of the month, check them out. And that, and that went on for a little while. And that's around when, like I said, I started to, that's when I got invited to do that contest. But that also kind of helped along the great video series that I do once a month, the great album series that I do once a month, where I'm like, hey, these are my favorite albums of the past month, which actually I had forgotten to do. So I need to actually do that.
Oh, good. We're reminding you to do work.
One more quick question, I guess, before we wrap up. Speaking of YouTube, are you bothered by any of the recent changes to YouTube, the Google Plus comments integration, and also I think the new, not super new, but the interface now is definitely pushed away from, like you said, like categories, like the music page, and it's a lot about your subscribers and a few popular videos on the front page. Do you notice anything different in terms of like the kind of comments you're seeing or the subscriber levels or anything like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, after the Google Plus thing got implemented, I haven't seen any changes in terms of how many comments I get, how many subscribers I get, how many views I get, or anything like that, honestly. Everything has been, I mean, the changes that YouTube has done, it's made it a little bit of a pain in the butt, because there are some people who, here's the reason I'm not really that offended by the changes that YouTube made, and why I think that that it's all just an attempt by Google to get you to use fucking Google Plus, or make it actually seem like people are using Google Plus when they're not. Because to me it's less upsetting, because I'm just gathering my thoughts here. For one, the biggest inconvenience that has led to is just that there are some people who I can't comment back to for whatever reason. I don't completely understand why.
Oh, the reply system is really awful now. It's like when you see a reply to someone, a lot of times you have to click it and then it'll refresh the page and bring you to that comment instead of just having them in a chain like it did before.
Well, there are some people who the reply doesn't even pop under. And I don't know why. There are some people who I can reply to and who I can't, but that's one of the more annoying things I've noticed. I haven't run into a situation where there's a guy or a girl that I really have to fucking reply to and I just can't, and it's not letting me. But there are some people who, for whatever reason, some people are like, hey, will you review this record? And I would love to say yes or no, but for whatever reason I can't. And that's the biggest inconvenience to me. I mean, I do like the fact that responses are threaded now. I mean, I think that's cool. But one other thing that I dislike, though, is the fact that the top comments sort of like pop up on top, and if they're all threaded, it's like you got to really fucking scroll in order to see the random comments underneath. You know what I mean? Because you may pass like 5 or 6 comments that have 20 replies on each of them before you can actually see something that people are saying right now. Because that's something that I may be trying to do because I want to know what people are requesting. You know, and the thing is, the reason Google is forcing stuff like this is because, well, they made Google Plus and nobody signed up for it. So then what they did was that they made it so that if you have a Gmail account or if you have a YouTube account, you have to have a Google Plus account. So then, because nobody signed up for Google Plus, they forced everyone to have Google Plus. And even though everybody was forced to have a Google Plus,
still no one's using it.
They still didn't use Google Plus. So now what they're doing is they're making it so that they're not forcing you to use Google Plus if you really care about not using Google Plus, but they're going to make you accidentally use it by going on YouTube, their biggest site, and by commenting, and there's always that check, and it's like, use Google Plus. Like, do you want to post your comment to Google Plus? And, you could, of course, click it off, but, less people are going to do that because they don't care. So of course, all of these comments and all of this activity is now being logged on Google Plus, but it's just all like fake interaction. It's just all fake usage. You know what I mean? Some people are like all mad about that, but nobody's going on Google Plus to see what you've written on YouTube. Nobody's like waking up in the morning and thinking like, I think I'll go on Google Plus to see what Anthony commented on YouTube. Nobody's saying that.
And everyone's going to do that now.
Everybody's going to do that now, just to like try it and then realize that there's really no point doing it anyway. Since you can just go on my YouTube feed and see what I'm commenting anyway.
The way the top comments are sorted as well is a little different. Like, I think they tried to put an emphasis on, like, if you have people that you're in circles with on Google Plus or whatever, or people they think based on all their data they've collected about you that are probably going to be relevant to you, they'll put those higher up in the top comments, and it's not necessarily just based on the ups and down thumbs now.
No, I mean, I'm not disappointed by YouTube. I know that this protocol is most likely something that was forced upon them by Google, and YouTube is one of the biggest websites in the world. What about teaming up so closely with Google Plus would help their face in the media or help them, become even bigger as a website? Nothing. Unless Google was actually able to, in the next year or so, come up with some genius idea that would actually make people want to start using Google Plus.
Well, Google's going to be dominating the tech world for the next 5 years anyway, at least. And so it's like, why would you worry about this when you have so many other things people constantly use?
I think they're a little afraid about, that they need more revenue streams. Like, Google is pretty heavily reliant on AdSense and their ad revenue and the search engine stuff. And so they want to diversify out there, and that's what Android kind of started as, like, we need to get into all these other markets so we're not just sitting on the search engine stuff.
Oh, when the OS comes out, they're gonna start getting a lot of money from that alone.
Yeah, they're just trying to diversify, and they're just trying to make sure that their social media irons stay hot in the fire, and that's all. I mean, I'm not really disappointed about YouTube in terms of any of the changes that they've made to the website. I mean, there are some things that, like, I guess it kind of annoys me that there are some videos that I had out in like 2010 when the setup and everything was different and the description box was on one side and not on the bottom. And, I'm like, go in the description box over there.
Oh, the doobly-doo?
Yeah. And it's like, and now it's not where it used to be. But I mean, the only thing about YouTube that honestly has disappointed me as of late was just the YouTube Music Awards.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say the YouTube Music Awards were terribly run production. That was it was. I mean, not
only was the production really rough in terms of it was really just boring to watch. But I think YouTube is really inconsistent in that they are great at being a platform and a champion of independently produced video content that is actually interesting and different from what you're going to see on TV, and yet they make little to no effort in this award show to put the spotlight on independent music artists.
Yeah,
that was
Flylo made a
right.
comment about that himself. It's like, oh, why would you make this thing about people that you see on every other music video award or music award, and it's like you have people you made famous, but you're not acknowledging them.
Hell, even Tyler the Creator said something along those lines.
Yeah.
and he was there.
Tyler did say that, and and he was right in saying that. But it's also not necessarily YouTube's fault either, because the thing is, I feel like people are a little less adventurous when it comes to music than when it comes to fucking, funny videos. You
Yeah.
know what
Oh
I
yeah,
mean?
no, that's
The thing is, even without YouTube, curating the artists that they do, the most viewed, pieces of music on YouTube are like all on the Vivo channel, and shit like that. It's all mainstream stuff that you would hear on the radio otherwise. And like you were saying earlier, the internet has essentially become like this training ground, or this sort of like, a bit of a place where major labels can kind of experiment and see what is or what isn't a hot sound before they actually put it out on the radio.
Oh yeah, Justin Bieber was one of the first ones of those where he got picked up by Usher or something. I think.
yeah, it was
right?
Usher.
Yeah, by Usher, just off of him doing like acoustic guitar things by himself on YouTube. So, the YouTube Music Awards it just felt kind of like an MTV Music Awards without the professionalism of running. It was Jason Schwartzman running around, and you couldn't hear what he was saying, and it was very. It was a little awkward.
Poor Reggie Watts.
Yeah, him too. Anyway, thanks so much for your time and spending so much time with us talking about all this stuff. It's a great conversation.
Yeah, feel free to tune in for the idiot this year.
Yeah.
I will. Or I will feel free to if I haven't already listened to my record by then.
Yeah, it's gonna be like next week, sometime like in like the 11th or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, there are so many people who go on MU and pretend to be me that if
Everyone just says go to bed, Fantano, like every 5 minutes. Any
Like,
reply.
Like if I actually go on there and try to and actually say anything, nobody believes that it's me. So
Have you ever gotten a comment that's randomly out of place? You're not even talking about you. You just get it and someone says go to bed, Fantano. You ever get one of those?
I've seen comments that people will say go to bed, Fantano, to people who aren't even me. When it's not even people like pretending to be me. They'll just say something that I would agree with.
And they say, "Is that you?"
There was one time, and maybe this will be funny to say. There's only been one time where I've posted anonymously, and somebody said "Go to bed, Fantano," and it was me. Though I think they just said it because I didn't think they really
Just
said
random
it.
chance.
I think it was just random chance. But there was this one guy who's saying about how black people don't like Bjork, and I said my girlfriend is black and she loves Bjork. And then this one guy just said, "Go to bed, Fantano."
I think I saw that thread, and I saw when that happened.
And I said, "You know what? Fuck it." And then I just left. And I said, "You know what? Fuck you."
They got you, man.
They got me. They did. They did.
Anyway, so maybe we'll try to keep in touch and do that sometime. This was a really interesting conversation, and we covered a ton of ground. And now we have to try to figure out how to break this up into chunks somehow so we can play it in between stuff. But
We'll play it live.
We'll play the entire thing.
Fantano,
Play the
man,
entire
chella.
thing, and if you want, you can play the entire thing, and if you want, you could put the whole thing up on YouTube, and I will. If you put the whole thing up on YouTube, I will put it up on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
we last year we just or in the summer
Well, Dan
we broke
promoted
into
it.
chunks.
When we got
during-
Dan Barrett, he
Mhm,
promoted
yeah.
it on an enemies list or something like that.
Right. We broke it into chunks for the broadcast, and then we put it all up as a whole, I believe, on the site, on the blog or
We're
whatever.
probably gonna
But
just
yeah,
do previews for this, and then just do snippets during the show, then put the full thing up on YouTube, like you said.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah.
Good on
I
you.
guess. Yeah, great talking to you.
Great
Yeah.
talking to you
Have
guys
a
too.
good day.
All right. Later then, I guess.
I'll see you guys
All right.
on the internet.